Here's something that you should find deeply unsettling. A text written around 500 BC by a Chinese military general, a man who almost certainly never existed as a single person, is currently in the top 10 bestseller lists on Amazon. Not in a historical category, not in military strategy, in business, self-help, in psychology. And here's the thing, it's not because people are obsessed with war, which would be understandable in today's climate, but because right now, in 2026, with things such as social media turning every single opinion into a battlefield, algorithms deciding what you're angry about today, the news deciding what you're allowed to consume and be angry about and be upset about and be pissed off about, which is largely a news format because we tend to lean more towards negativity than we do positivity. Information hitting us at a rate that our brains literally weren't built to handle. People are going back to Sun Tzu because he diagnosed something. He wrote, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." The enemy that he was talking about wasn't always on the battlefield. It wasn't the opponent that you are physically fighting with a sword or a gun. Sometimes the enemy is in your own reactive mind, your own scattered attention, your own inability to know whether to push or whether to step back. This episode is not about war. It's about the terrain we're all navigating right now and what a dead general has to say about surviving it. Now, why does this matter? Let's be honest where we are right now. We are living through a moment of extraordinary cognitive overload. The information landscape has changed faster in the last 20 years than in the previous 2,000 years. The average person in 2026 is exposed to more data, more conflict, more belief-shifting opinions, and more noise in a single day than a medieval scholar would have encountered in a lifetime. And we ain't coping too fucking well. The research on information overload, and there is a lot of it, consistently shows that when people are exposed to more information than they can meaningfully process, the outcome isn't better decisions, it's worse. It's more stress, it's more reactive behavior, it's a narrowing, not an expanding of perspective. It's like me giving you 1,000 bits of information a second or 1,000 questions to be able to contemplate a second and say, here, answer all this now. It's way too much. But you have to be able to answer it. Just with the Zeigarnik effect of open loops, we have to try and close loops. We have to try to have an answer to the question. We have something in us that inherently has to close the loops that have been opened. It's like Sheldon in Big Bang Theory. When he starts something, he physically has to finish it. He can't leave anything like unopened or undone. He can't leave just one dish to wash. He can't not have a question answered. He can't get closure. And that's what we're like today. And this mess walks into social media. Platforms are explicitly engineered, not accidentally, but deliberately to hijack your attention. They want your eyeballs on them. And they don't care who pays the consequences. They want to keep you in a state of low-grade conflict. Algorithms have learned from billions and billions of data points and continue to do so that outrage keeps you scrolling longer than joy does. You can see 1,000 videos of war, of hatred, of conflict, of people's opinions, of people arguing versus 1,000 squirrel skiing water ski videos. You will go to the conflict. It's more interesting. There's shit going on. You're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen here. That's why reality TV shows do so well. My gripe with reality TV shows is some of them, the concept's actually quite good. My partner's into, what's it called? Maths, Married at First Sight. And the general concept is trying to find love. Yeah, this is quite a cool thing. But it's actually not about that whatsoever. And the show clearly fails because statistically, many of the people that go on the show don't end up staying together. So you would be much. So clearly it's just a popularity contest. It's I want to go on the show to get famous. I want to go on the show to get known. I don't actually give a fuck about the love. And the experts on those shows are fucking terrible too. The stuff that they come out with is just nonsense for the most. And this is not a viewer, by the way. This is just my 2 cents in being able to catch little bits here and there as I'm walking past or from what my partner tries telling me about. And I really do my best to ignore her. But sometimes it filters through. This is the battlefield that Sun Tzu never imagined, but his principles about terrain, about energy, about knowing yourself and knowing your enemy map onto this with uncomfortable precision. You don't need to be a general to need a strategy for how to spend your attention. You don't need to be in a war to know when not to fight. You need this because you're alive in 2026, and this forces competing for your focus, for your emotions, and your reactions are so sophisticated in ways that most of us just haven't caught up yet. We haven't got enough mental fortitude and resilience compared to our predecessors, our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, because we haven't had to go through conflict. We haven't had to fight. We haven't had to have ourselves challenged enough where life is on the line. We can kind of just sit comfortable in our cozy living rooms, scroll endlessly, consume endless shit on TV, and there'll be no consequences. So it's very easy to get lost in doing nothing. And this isn't about being cold or calculated. It's about being deliberate in a world that profits from your impulsiveness. Here's the thing that most people get wrong about the art of war. They think the art of war is about aggression. The word war is right there in the title. So people assume that Sun Tzu is telling you to be ruthless, to attack, to crush your competition. And that's how it gets applied in some boardrooms. After being in some quite high figure meetings as a justification for kind of this zero sum thinking, winner takes all mentality, everyone treats everyone like a transaction, like a negotiation, like a battle to be won. But if you go back and actually read the book, the text is obsessed with this idea of not fighting. Sun Tzu spends more time explaining when not to engage, when not to attack. His definition of supreme generalism or generalship isn't the most aggressive strategy. It is the one that achieves the outcome with the least amount of expenditure of resources. He writes that the general who wins without drawing a sword is the greatest general of all. In other words, the entire book is about conversation. It's about understanding. It's about strategic patience. It's about knowing the difference between a fight that's worth having and a fight that will cost you more than it gives you. Compare that to how most of us actually operate online or in relationships or at work. It's almost embarrassing. We have to fight every battle. We have to respond to every comment, every provocation. We pour energy into our arguments that haven't changed a single mind, and it never will. It's when someone leaves a comment and they're coming from their own perspective and they have a refusal to want to change their perspective and opinion, then the question becomes, is it even worth your time? Ask yourself, what am I going to get out of this? And you can very quickly tell by responding immediately and them just still but trying to really fight and butt heads with you. Some people just don't want the understanding. Some people would rather have the conflict versus being wrong or being open to go, you know what, that's actually an interesting angle. We get pulled into conflicts that somebody else's algorithm is choosing for us. Sun Tzu would look at that and call it the behavior of a bad general. The reframe is this: the art of war is not a manual for aggression. It is, at its core, a manual for attention management, for knowing what deserves your energy and what doesn't, for recognizing the terrain before you commit, for understanding that in any conflict, real or metaphorical, the most important resource is not your strength, it's your clarity. And we're all living in an era, especially designed to destroy your clarity. So why does a book about ancient military tactics stay relevant to everyday life in 2026? Most self-help books are out of date within 5 years. The Art of War is 2,500 years old and is still currently one of the best sellers of all time. So what is it getting that everybody else misses? Sun Tzu's insights are not about tactics. They're about the underlying patterns of conflict, decision-making, and most importantly, human behavior. These patterns don't change much across centuries unless we turn into a different species. They still are relevant. What changes is the environment or the arena. The psychology of extension, of reactive decision-making, of fighting without intelligence. These are as true in social media as they were on an ancient battlefield 2,000 years ago. The research on information overload offers a striking parallel. A 2024 scoping review in Computers in Human Behavior reports found that information overload, characterized by excessive data that people can't meaningfully process, consistently leads to poor decision making, overloading cognitive pressure, and decreased productivity. The mechanism Sun Tzu warned against, committing troops without knowing the terrain, is now called decision fatigue. There is too much shit going on. There's too many people that want too much from us. I'm sure everyone can relate to this at work. It just seems like every year more is demanded from us. Every year. And the compensation for that demand doesn't outweigh the demand. And I'm all for it. It's like if you're an employer and you're wanting more out of your staff, or if you're a person or you're an entrepreneur and you're wanting more out of your situation, there needs to be some kind of competition, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's time back to be able to go and spend time with your family, whether it's more finances that you can give yourself and family a better quality of life. But that in the case, people are wanting more for less now. And genuinely, I think that's a human characteristic. I think that is an issue with the human psychology. The reason that ancient strategic texts survive is that they address human constraints, limited attention, limited energy, and the tendency to be reactive rather than deliberate. Those constraints haven't evolved out of us. If anything, the demands of those constraints are higher than they have ever been. Sun Tzu isn't nostalgic. He's more diagnostic than anything. There's a piece in the book that talks about knowing yourself and knowing your enemy, which everybody quotes, but what is it? But does it actually hold up to science? Sun Tzu's most famous line sounds like a fortune cookie, but modern psychology has been studying the same idea for decades. They just call it something different. The psychological equivalent of knowing yourself is metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking, recognize your biases, and adjust your behavior accordingly. It turns out this capacity isn't just philosophically valuable. It has measurable effects on mental health, decision-making, resilience, and even physical health outcomes. Excuse me. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Intelligence by Varshni and Barbie at the University of Illinois found that metacognitive skills, specifically the capacity to evaluate and control your own mental processes, are strongly associated with well-being and with effective group problem solving. Critically, these skills are distinct from raw intelligence, which is IQ. You can be highly intelligent and have extremely poor metacognition. The person who knows what they don't know consistently outperforms the person who doesn't. Sun Tzu was describing metacognition 2,500 years ago before the term existed. So the practical implication is sobering. Most of us are operating with significant blind spots about our own motivations, our biases, and our emotional triggers. Sometimes, for a lot of people, we don't like accepting them. It is seen as a weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's a human default. But it does mean that knowing yourself is not a destination. It's a daily practice. And in an environment that constantly pushes you towards reactive behavior, social media, 24-hour news, outrage cycles, the ability to observe your own reactions before you act on them is functionally a survival skill. Social media really is designed to make us fight. But what would Sun Tzu say about how we use it? Every day, billions of people log onto platforms whose entire business model depends on them staying in a state of emotional agitation. Sun Tzu had a lot to say about the strategic value of agitating your enemy, but what does it mean when we've essentially outsourced that job to corporations? Sun Tzu advised if your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Makes extremely poor decisions. You know that when you're in an argument with someone. If you know when you've got the upper hand, when they start to say shit that you know they're going to regret later on, you know that they're reacting out of anger or frustration or low temperament, low self-esteem, whatever their underlying character flaw is, you know that you've just kind of got them. Social media algorithms have industrialized this principle. not to defeat you in military sense, but to extract your attention and time for advertising revenue. The mechanism is identical. The scale is unprecedented. In 2021, researchers at Yale, Brady and Crockett, published a landmark study in Science Advances analyzing 12.7 million tweets from 7,500 users. They found that positive social feedback, likes and shares, expressions of moral outrage directly increase the likelihood of future outrage expressions, consistent with reinforcement learning. In other words, the platforms are literally training you to be more outraged over time. It's not that angry people are drawn into social media. Social media creates angrier people. Sun Tzu would recognize this immediately as a deliberate strategy to compromise an opponent's judgment. The implication isn't to delete social media, although that might not be the worst idea for some people. If you find you can't handle it, as a quick side tangent, I liken it to drugs and alcohol. If you find that you can go out on a night out, have a few drinks, have a merry old time, be the happiest person in the bar, great, go for it. But if you find that after a few drinks, you're a piece of shit, you probably shouldn't drink. Same thing on social media. If you're going out there and you're actively trolling people, if you're actively trying to talk down to people, if you're actively being a piece of shit, it's probably not good in your life. Just think about it this way. Whether you have social media or not, your life will continue on. It's not like oxygen. You don't need it to breathe. You don't need it to pursue a day-to-day living. You don't need social media. You don't need media in general. You need human connection. And if your version of human connection is being on social media and creating negativity, then fuck you and get off it. You'll be a better person for it, and you'll probably have friends, so you don't have to go on social media anyway. Sun Tzu's advice would be, do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. Do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. And that enemy is your algorithm. And let's be honest, algorithms are people. The founders of social media platforms aren't specifically sat there going, how can I piss off Terry? How can I piss off Joanne today? It is simply pushing out the message of other people. And if other people are creating negativity in the world, then you are going to be at the mercy of that. You're going to see a ton of that shit, and you are ultimately going to be affected by it. Social media algorithms are people algorithms. It is human behavior algorithms. It is not a bot just sat there trying to curate things like Geppetto doing to Pinocchio. It's not a puppeteer. It is simply showing us our best, because there is good. There is good in social media. There is good in the world. There is good in the news. Our best and our worst traits. The downside is that our worst traits usually shine through more than our best ones. Sun Tzu was obsessed with not wasting energy. We now know our cognitive resources are genuinely finite. How do you protect them? Sun Tzu treated energy of his army as finite, a precious resource to be conserved and directed. Modern cognitive science has shown and confirmed that attention and self-control work the same way. So why do most of us spend both as if they're infinite? The idea that cognitive resources can be depleted, that there is a real cost to sustained mental effort, decision-making, and emotional regulation is one of the more robust findings in psychological research. Even if the specific mechanisms are still debated, what is not in dispute is the phenomenology. I'm trying to say that word with the dry mouth. Phenomenology. Basically, the concept of sustained cognitive effort produces measurable fatigue, and performance on subsequent tasks degrades. This is the modern science of what Sun Tzu called the exhausted army. It is trying to do too much, expect too much. A 2025 study by Ren et al., published in Brain Sciences, found that cognitive demand combined with time pressure, which describes most modern knowledge work, produces measurable mental fatigue that impairs subsequent performance. This echoes a broader body of research on information overload. A 2024 paper in Sage Open found that overload and FOMO in the digital workplace are significant predictors of burnout and emotional exhaustion amongst workers. The modern knowledge worker is fighting on too many fronts simultaneously. Sun Tzu diagnosed this as a fatal error. Sun Tzu wrote, "The good fighter will be terrible in his onset and prompt in his decision." Terrible and prompt, not exhausted and delayed. The ability to act decisively when it matters depends on having conserved resources for that moment. If you are fatigued, exhausted, stressed out, fucking pissed off, you've not slept well, cortisol's through the roof, you've got poor nutrition, poor sleep, you've not been able to go outside and get some good quality vitamin D or some sunlight or some fresh air, and then you're trying to make really effective decisions, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So you need to be able to protect your resources. Every low stakes argument you have, every doom scrolling session, every unnecessary notification that you respond to, these aren't free. They're withdrawals from a cognitive account that needs to be there when you genuinely need it. This is not an argument for being passive. It's an argument for being intentional about where your finite attention goes. Finite attention. We don't have an infinite amount of resources, and that resources is our energy. Regardless of how good your nutrition, how good your sleep is, it's still not enough to continue to be able to bang your head against the wall and try to get more out of yourself. There is a limit. You can definitely build that capacity. You can build that work capacity. You can build that mental tolerance, that mental resilience, but there's still going to be a limit. You've still only got 24 hours in the day. You still need to sleep somewhat. You still need to eat at some point. You still need to, especially for a healthy life, have good quality mental and physical hygiene. You still need to shower, bathe, use the bathroom, exercise somewhat. You still need to do all these things. And ultimately that condenses things down. It's like I can't remember the exact study, but it said really, I think Naval Ravikant spoke about this, is like you're really looking at about 3 to 4 hours of great quality output per day. Great quality. After that, it just goes to shit. So let's just say if that is true, again, great fucking quality. People that are spending 12, 16, 18-hour days, and I've done them many a times for many years as well. I know that my performance was shit. I know that when I've had 11, 12 PT clients in a day, 60-minute sessions, it's fucking long days. By the end of it, those people are getting nothing from me. I'm leaning on shit. I'm fatigued. I'm exhausted. I've barely fucking eaten. I've barely drunk any water because I can't use the bathroom because I've got a client right there. I'm exhausted. So those people, those clientele are getting nothing out of me. I'm surprised they stuck around, to be honest with you. But that's the reality. So what do we do? What is the 1% framework? What do we need to be able to understand? There's 5 things. Your attention is not infinite, so stop spending it like it is. The research on cognitive fatigue is clear. It's concrete. Sustained decision-making, emotional regulation, and information processing depletes finite resources. Every low-stakes argument you engage in, every notification that you respond to that you know you don't need to be able to respond to, every argument that you get in on social media, every outrage cycle, every time that you watch something and it emotionally charges you up, these have a cost that shows up later. When you need to be sharp and you're not, and you know that you're not. Why does something feel off? If something feels off, the first practical question is not how do I fight better? It's like, where am I spending my cognitive budget on, and is it worth it? And a really easy way to be able to find out where it is just go on your phone, go in your settings and see where you're spending your time. And then knowing if you are being productive objectively at work or in school or wherever it might be, delete the thing that you're spending most time on. Delete or just avoid it for a little while and just see what happens. For the most part, you can almost guarantee for most people, that's just going to be social media. Just don't go on it for a week, for a whole week. Don't go on it. See how your life changes. The algorithm is point 2. The algorithm is choosing your battles for you. Start choosing your own. Brady and Crockett's research at Yale is not an abstract finding. It means that your current level of outrage about your current events is in part a trained behavior reinforced by social media platforms to keep you engaged for advertising and revenue. That doesn't mean that your concerns, that doesn't mean that your concerns aren't real. Some of them absolutely are, but it means that you should be applying Sun Tzu's questions. Did I choose this conflict or did someone choose it for me? The ability to disengage from an algorithmically assign fight, and redirect that attention to something valuable is not a small act. For some people, it is the hardest and most important strategic decision that can be made. Point 3 here. Looking for these little 1% improvements. Adaptability is not weakness. The evidence on psychological flexibility is unambiguous. The most resilient people are not the most rigid ones. They are the ones who can hold goals firmly while remaining flexible about how they pursue them. The goal stays there. The North Star is still true. But how you get there and navigate that has to be incredibly malleable. Ask before reacting. Is the response I'm about to give the product of an assessment, or is it resistance? The water doesn't fight the riverbank, it just finds a path to get through. Point number 4, know yourself is not a destination, is a daily habit. The metacognition research shows that this isn't about one big breakthrough of self-knowledge. It's about the daily practice of noticing, what am I feeling right now? Is that feeling an accurate guide to action here? What do I actually want from this situation? These small little questions that Sun Tzu used to ask himself, these intelligence gathering questions applied inward. They're not questions that should be taken lightly. These are questions that gather evidence or data points so that you can take a more therapeutic approach to yourself to be able to understand, what am I doing? What am I feeling? Who am I in this moment? Is this the person that I want to represent and what I want to be? Point 5, decide what winning looks like before you enter any conflict. This is the one that most people skip. We get into arguments, negotiations, difficult conversations, competitive situations. We are without having a clearly defined outcome. What does success actually look like? Sun Tzu never committed forces without a strategic objective. In practice, before your next significant, difficult conversation, ask, what am I trying to achieve here? What would winning look like? And winning doesn't mean I get something and they don't. It means, what is the outcome that I am trying to get? And that helps you navigate the conversation towards that, because otherwise emotions will take over and shit will hit the fan real quickly. Here's a quick story. That will kind of relate. And I think it's a brilliant one. In 1965, a young American colonel named John Boyd was stationed in Nevada, working at a fighter pilot school where he had earned the name 42nd Boyd. His claim was extraordinary. He could defeat any other pilot in a dogfight from a position of disadvantage in under 40 seconds. And he was right. Nobody could beat him. But Boyd wasn't interested in being the best pilot. He was interested in why he was the best pilot. He spent years obsessively studying what made the difference in aerial combat. Not the strength of the plane, not the aggression of the pilot, but something subtler. The ability to observe what was happening, orient it correctly, decide on a response, and act faster than the opponent could do the same. He called it the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Boyd realized that the pilot who lost the dogfight wasn't always the less skilled one. Often it was the one who got stuck, who oriented incorrectly, who held onto a mental model that didn't match reality, who decided too slowly because they were working from false information. He later applied this framework far beyond aviation, to business, politics, to everyday decision-making. And when you look at it closely, you realize he was essentially rediscovering Sun Tzu, because Sun Tzu said exactly this. He modify his tactics in relation to his opponent will succeed. Boyd's insight, the one that changed how NATO armies train, how Silicon Valley thinks about product development, how any strategic thinking is done in conditions of uncertainty, is the speed of adaptation matters more than strength. The person who updates their understanding of a situation wins. Not the most aggressive, not the best resource, it is the most adaptable. John Boyd died in 1997 with almost no personal possessions. He had turned down lucrative contracts, he had few official rewards, and has been passed over for promotion multiple times by people who found him too inconvenient. But his ideas changed how wars are fought, how companies operate, and how people think about decision-making under pressure. He understood understood, something that Sun Tzu understood, that most of us are still catching up to. The battle isn't within the enemy. The battle is with your own perception. If you get that right, everything else will follow. Here's a closing thought. And something that I keep coming back to with all of this. Sun Tzu was writing for generals facing life and death situations with incomplete information, under time pressure, and with thousands and thousands of lives depending on his clarity. And his core advice was, before you do anything, know yourself. Not because self-knowledge is a luxury or a spiritual practice or something you do when you've sorted everything else out, but because without it, you're operating blind. You will misread the terrain. You will spend your energy fighting battles chosen by someone else. You will mistake your emotional reactions for strategic insight. You will keep losing and not know why. We are not generals. The stakes usually are a little lower than going out into all-out war, but the cognitive demands are not. We live in a world that is far more skilled at exploiting your reactivity, your biases, your need for certainty and tribal belonging than any environment humans have ever navigated before. We are more distracted than ever. The platforms are sophisticated. The misinformation is sophisticated. The outrage machines are sophisticated. And to counter all of it, we don't need more information. It's not a better algorithm. It is the oldest strategic advice in the world. Know yourself. Know your enemy. Choose your terrain. Conserve your forces. Win without fighting if you can. Not as a metaphor, but as a practice. If any of this landed with you, share it with someone who's tired of fighting battles they didn't choose.